Welcome to our first edition of Opinion Nation. I'm your host, Christy Rankes, and each show will have different subjects to discuss with our guests. This show will be more of a talk show format and focus on topics related to current events in sim racing. If you're wondering why we started another show, it's because a lot of you out there asked for it. So for this show, my one and only guest will be Sean Cole as we get things started. In the future, we hope to bring in a variety of guests from around the sim racing community. So Sean, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm extremely excited. This is something that we've wanted to do for a very long time. And like you said, people have kind of asked us for this in addition to our desire to kind of just vent a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the recent editions of This Week Inside Sim Racing, you and Darren brewed up some controversy by talking about a few touchy subjects with some people. So people asked that we keep these topics completely separate from sim racing news and reviews.
And I think that was a good point that people made because, again, we want to bring up these issues or topics or things that might even make some people upset occasionally. And we've proven we can do that, but maybe that wasn't the place to do it.
Right, so here's a separate venue. We just want to make some things clear. We're not here to offend anybody. We simply want to educate and inform, create conversation in the community, not necessarily controversy, but let's all remember we're talking about video games. This is your hobby. Let's have some fun with it. So my first question, Sean, before we get to the sim racing topics, why the name Opinion Nation?
That's a great question, and it actually goes back in time a little bit. Good friends of ours, good friends of the show, Frosty St. Clair and John Prather, they did sort of a radio format show, and it was by the name Opinion Nation, and it did focus on iRacing, but it was very much the same format as what we're looking. Raising issues, raising topics, raising debate. And since we're sort of the same format, we're going to kind of honor them with the same name, and I actually hope they like our name.
Well, that sounds good. So now that we have background on the show name, onto our first topic on today's edition of Opinion Nation, we have two subjects, Payware Mods and then how much to focus on mental preparation for a sim race. So first up, Payware Mods. In the most recent This Week Inside Sim Racing, we talked about the R Factor 2 T5 Touring Mod by United Designs. My first question for you, Sean, is do you think that sim racing has a place for Payware Mods?
Yeah, there's definitely room for Payware Mods. The big question, what I think is going to actually upset people is, what are you getting in return for the payware? So, you know, you pay for a sim, that's obvious, and there's always been modding communities within the sim racing community. So payware was sort of not really a word used back in the day, but now we're looking at DLC from regular titles, we're looking at maybe higher quality content, and maybe there is room for payware.
Interesting. So what about the fact that R Factor 2 is still in beta? Do you think United Designs jumped the gun a little bit?
That's a great question. And I would say personally, and this is just my personal opinion, yes, they absolutely jumped the gun. R Factor 2 at this point is a little incomplete. Its community has not been built up. I don't even know if what we're playing or seeing from R Factor 2 is the final version of the sim or game. So now to have a pay for content, you know, car come out or cars come out, it just seems kind of odd because I don't know how far along we even are. And the other thing is, I don't know what the community is going to bring. So historically, R Factor 1 has always had tremendous amount of free mods, and there were some pay mods back for R Factor as well. But yeah, they definitely jumped the gun on this one.
Well, on that note, let's talk about money a little bit. €5 per car or €10 for all three cars. Do you think that's worth it? I mean, here in the US, that's about $13, and some older titles now sell for less than that. So,
yeah.
You know, what do you think about that?
I think that pricing is a fair price depending on what you're getting in return. So if you're talking about iRacing, you ultimately are paying per car, every new car you want. Or if you're talking about like Forza, where they have DLC, maybe you're getting 5 cars for maybe $10. So I'm not going to argue the price point so much, and I think that's actually pretty fair. Again, it comes down to the quality for the price, and I think not everybody's going to agree with me, because I think a lot of people feel that there's no reason to have to pay for any additional content at all.
Have you driven them, and what do you think?
I drove the cars, and again, getting back to one of your first questions, they seem a little early, so I'm not sure, and it's like I almost don't want to pass judgment because in my opinion, at the price they're at, maybe it wasn't enough car. So I just think of how much content there is that I don't have to pay for, and when I compare it, this one wasn't it. I mean, so it's sort of two questions. It's like, is pay content okay, and is this okay as pay content? So, I mean, they are good cars, but I wouldn't say they're better than other things I've driven, and since there's an expense associated with it, that kind of rubs me wrong.
Okay, well, that wraps up our first topic. We'd like to hear what you have to say, and we'll have threads in our forum, Facebook, and Twitter with links here in the description. Tell us what you think on YouTube as well. Our next topic is focus on being in the right frame of mind for sim racing. Recently, we ran a segment where Darren got very frustrated during the 2.4 hours of Daytona. He had mentioned he had some things going on personally, and that might have affected his mindset or concentration that day. You know, Sean, what's your take on that? How do you mentally prepare for this kind of a race?
This is something that we've covered on the show for years now. You know, ruling out distractions is a big part, and we've talked about that. But to race, to be at that performance where you're hitting every mark, I mean, the timing in racing is down to thousandths of a second, and there's really no room to be thinking about a doorbell or a phone call or your job or your girlfriend or anything. I mean, at that timing and that much precision, you have to be 100% devoted, and it's very important because this is no different than real life racing when it comes to that. And I can't even imagine being in a car at 200 and letting my brain stray too far. I mean, you'd be risking your life. It would be dangerous. So in the case of sim racing, obviously we don't have that same danger. We have more distractions because we're in our homes, but it's a really important part. If you want to be at the top level, you have to be prepared when you jump into the car.
So what's your opinion on that day? I mean, do you think Darren should have reconsidered driving? Would you do something like that before a big race? I mean, pull out due to not being mentally ready?
Yeah, you know, first off, that moment, that controversy is what sparked this show. And looking back on that day, it's easy to say, and Darren admitted it, he was not mentally prepared. He was maybe physically prepared more than he was mentally prepared, you know. So what we did see, though, was a mental breakdown. And you know, there are multiple topics in that show that day, the blocking, the gentleman racer. But focusing on this topic and Darren, there was a mental breakdown. And it came down to distraction. It came down to other things in his life that were robbing his ability to concentrate on the race. And I can only speak from my personal experience here, but when I am making mistakes, I get frustrated. When I get frustrated, I have a foul mouth. I'm going to get heated, you know, and on that day, the camera is on him. So, you know, yeah, I think he definitely did not have the mental preparation he needed, and that led to everything that unfolded that day.
Right. Well, on a scale from 1 to 10, how high of a level of concentration do you think is needed to sim race?
If you want to win races, you need to be at about a 10 to 10. Now, I've raced with people who can race and somehow like type you a message on the keyboard. So maybe there are others who could get away with 8 or 9. But for me personally, if I want to win, if I want to race at the level that I am capable of, it takes 10 out of 10. But there are times that I take things a little more casually, and maybe just for screwing around or for practice, I only need to be at a 6. You know, maybe I have some other distractions. Maybe I'm even talking on TeamSpeak while racing. So it does change depending on the situation.
Well, let's talk suggestions. I mean, how do you suggest that somebody could stay focused during a race?
The first thing is, where are you at in your head? Again, focusing on Darren that day, he had factors that had nothing to do with racing, had nothing to do with the show that had come in. And we all have this. Maybe it's something at work, maybe it's something with your family, maybe it's just that you're not feeling well that day. So, I mean, the first thing is being able to even be in that head state. From that moment on, it's everything else. It's your distractions. I personally, when I race, I turn off all of the lights in the house. I race in total darkness. I put on headphones so that I can't hear a knock at the door, you know, and it's like, hey, if I miss a delivery, so what? I'm racing at 10/10ths right now, and I need everything I've got. You know, the other things are just having your controls and all of your whole setup just where you want it, where everything's predictable and you're not having to think about anything. Because honestly, when I'm racing, all I think about is my wheel, my pedals, and the apex of the next corner. You know, and that's all you really should be thinking about. So it's how much tunnel vision can you create for yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my last question for you is, you know, I definitely want you to level with me a little bit, Sean. I mean, have you ever had a bad race where your mind wasn't there? I mean, what was that like? What was the final outcome? Did you come out ahead? Go ahead and tell me a little bit.
Well, I'll tell you right off the bat, I think we threw Darren under the bus and made it seem like he does something that I wouldn't do myself. I myself had done some of the craziest things. I mean, I think back when I used to do some go-karting, if somebody had put a microphone inside my helmet, if they could have heard the things that I was saying, not just to the other karters,
your
but
mother
also
wouldn't
to
have wanted
myself.
to hear
No.
this. Yeah.
Oh, no. And I am not a nice guy when it comes to that moment. I mean, you know, I might be a nice guy every day, but when I'm on the track, that's competition. That's a different level. And the first person I'm critical of is myself. And I'm extremely critical, and I will curse at myself, and I will be very let down by myself. And the other is the other drivers around me, and I am very expressive inside my helmet. So the other thing is, I noticed that Darren had also flipped the bird over his shoulder to the driver. I'll confess, I've done that as well. I've done that more than once. Sometimes you're just so in the battle, and it's just, I finally got by that guy, yeah. And it's like, of course he can't see, it doesn't matter unless you post your race. So, yeah, I'm guilty.
Well, thanks for your honesty, Sean, and so much for joining us. We have another thread dedicated to this subject solely at our social media sites. Make sure to join in on the conversation and give your opinion. That's going to wrap up our first edition of Opinion Nation. We hope you enjoyed it. You can visit us at isrtv.com to join the forum topic, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and subscribe here on YouTube. For Sean Cole, I'm Christy Rankes. Keep watching.
GT chassis racing rigs provided by Human Racing. Go to humanracing.co.th.